Good morning. How is everybody today? It's Tuesday. Working our way through a new week. And we are on the eve of the solstice. So the solstice moves around a little bit. And this year, pretty sure the solstice lands tomorrow, but I'll double check that. Either way, I can feel it. I can feel that calm and that peace before that beautiful sunshine shift, before that movement in our plane of light where it gets so dark and so still and so cold, and then it shifts and the light starts to become more. And it's one of, I will admit, I am quite partial to the solstices and the equinoxes. I really am. They are my favorite in the year for those quarter marks to say, okay, we're at the next quarter. And it also helps me frame my year into time that is manageable. It helps me frame the seasons into correlative placement in how my body responds to things. My body is very sensitive to weather and elements and changes. This year, like last night, it was, oh my goodness, it was like supposed to be negative 20 something or 30 something. I haven't looked outside, I admit, but I know that it was really cold. I know that this year for the solstice, it's supposed to be like negative 30, 40 at night, which has not happened in a while. I'd have to look at the calendar thing, but the colder it is on the solstice, the more the next quarter goes better. And there goes Astra. Are you okay? She sometimes eats, I think, a little too fast, and she gets this coughing, hacking, sneezing sound. But anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, so the colder the solstice, winter solstice, the better the next quarter goes for energy, because Mother Earth needs here the climate, right? The connection to Earth. The Earth needs to really go to sleep, really become insular, really turn in upon herself to sleep, to find that stillness, to follow the energy of what that feels like. It's almost like, if you think of sleep in our REM cycle, right? When you get a chunk of REM, you get a chunk of deep sleep where you're in that altered state of consciousness, the better you do the next day, the better your body has recovered. Winter, especially this far north, because I'm in Montana, is very much like Mother Earth's sleep cycle. She needs to have in her globe, her cold ends need to have good, solid, rich sleep to keep the ecosystem and the rest of the world moving. And there's a very complex dance that goes with that. And as our climate has warmed up, she has not gotten the sleep that she needs. And so I know that this is important. I know it from an energy perspective. I know it from someone who is integrally connected to Mother Earth's field and her energy and her consciousness. My guides tell me, and I have gotten the validation over and over and over and over in my life that there are things that man needs to change so that Mother Earth can get back to her proper sleep cycles. And I don't know if we've hit that tipping point yet. There are scientists that say we have. There are scientists who say we haven't. There are people who deny the whole thing is even a thing. It would be like saying, I don't have feet. They are an illusion. They are not really attached to me. Today's card is kind of a kick in the butt energetically. Bring it into form, number 41. Isn't that beautiful? I love the sacred geometry at the bottom here. This card, when I picked it up, I didn't even pick up the book for a minute. And we create ripples in everything we do. The ripples in a pond. We create those ripples by intention, by vibration, by everything that we do. I remember when I was a very angry teenager. Oh my goodness, was I an angry, hurt. I was a horribly angry, hurt individual. And I took it out on a lot of people. And I knew that. And it hurt me. It hurt me that I hurt other people, that I said angry things, that I was miserable. I was so miserable. And that carried into my 20s some too. There were behaviors and things and choices that I made that I hurt people. And I knew that it would ripple out. And in some cases, it was almost as though I was outside of myself, watching myself create the ripples and knowing full well that some of those ripples would carry out for decades. And other ripples that I knew would intersect back at another time and create healing. I could see them. I could see the vibrational ripples of that anger and that fear rippling out. And I've been an artist and a drawer my whole life, and there are two things that are really, really hard to do: feet and hands. And I got really good at them. Because every touch, every footstep creates a ripple. And that's why I became really good when I drew hands and feet, because hands and feet were not hands and feet. Hands and feet were touch points. When you walk upon the earth, you touch her. You come in contact with her. And you create those ripples of energy. When you touch someone, when you touch each other, touch becomes those vibrational ripples. Those intersections are ripples. And they are ripples of positivity, and those are ripples of light, and intention matters. You know, the word intention became a real big buzzword, I'd say probably about 12 years ago. It was not a buzzword before, because I would say the word intention and people would go, huh? I remember teaching a class with a whole bunch of, I was teaching a Wiccan 101 class is what I was teaching. And all of my Wiccan classes were very much wrapped around elements, ethics, energy. I didn't teach as much of the Wiccan principles as I did light work principles and living your life with purpose, with mindfulness. And these are before kind of the words were really buzzwords. I mean, I was using the word mindful and intentional way back when the word mindful it was before the book by the Dalai Lama came out that said mindfulness. Like before that book came out, you didn't see that a lot. I think there's actually a book now, Intentional Magic. And, there's a lot of changes that have happened in the last 30 years since I've never been in the closet, but since I threw out the rule book and started really intentionally teaching in the metaphysical spiritual realm, which I reside. So when I drew this card, I thought, okay, what are we doing with this card? Because this card visually and words bring it into form is talking about the ripples that we create with our connection to each other. But there's that footprint in there. And I remember years ago, somebody gave me a copy of that poem about Jesus and the footprints in the sand, right? Which I thought was a very beautiful poem. When we create footprints, it means we're leaving something intentionally or unintentionally behind. We're leaving an imprint and we're making a mark. I think of leaving a mark as in what is going to help my fellow brothers and sisters in the future, far in the future. And I remember my dad, I love Papa. He was amazing. He's such an amazing human being. He's not dead. I almost said he was dead, but he's not. Astra, don't mess with that baby. He bought me a journal, and it was one of those journals that's a little bit taller and narrower than this, really thick, like a tome. And it was a all-year journal, and you write a little bit every day. And he said, you should write. Your grandpa writes, because he did. Grandpa wrote in these little notebooks. And I know you know them, the little moleskin notebook type things. He had those. He had one in his pocket all the time. He always wrote in it every day. I don't know whatever happened to those things, but I think they would be fascinating to write a biography about my grandpa with. He was a fascinating human being. Papa said, that some of the most inspirational people in history wrote. They wrote every day. They wrote about their thoughts and their ideas. And he said that, I remember him encouraging me from not long after we came back from Europe. So it had to have been like 85, 86. He encouraged me over and over and over again, write in a journal. You really need to write in a journal. You are different. You're special. You need to write. You need to write your ideas down. You need to write what's coming through to you down. That's important. Now, I know that my papa always thought of my perceptions of the world as very creative. Okay, I am a creative person. But I never got from my dad any more validation than that for my perceptions. I think my mom at some point really did realize that I am different, and I do channel, and I am psychic, and it is a whole other thing. She didn't seem to like it, but she did acknowledge it at some point. I do remember that being acknowledged. And I was going somewhere with this. The journal thing, like he would tell me stories about General Patton or Marcus Aurelius, or who was the other one? There was somebody else that wrote in journals, and eventually all of their journals were published, and it was this big thing. Like, these were very inspirational people. And as though that was going to inspire me to write. Mostly it just intimidated me. I was like, I'm a little girl. Who's going to want to read a teenage girl's journals? By the way, in 2001, I burned them all up. I burned every single one of them up from pre-2001. They're gone. I did write. I wrote a lot. Many, many notebooks of journals. And mostly when I wrote in journals, I had to be careful because I discovered when I was 15 or 16 that my mother was reading them. And that felt very awful. So my journals were really poetry. So anything that I wrote that had to do with my emotions and my ideas and my heartfelt whatever went into poetry because I didn't want her to decipher what it is the real meaning was. I could look at the poem and know exactly what I was writing about, but she didn't always get that. It was my code because I tried creating, well, it's really hard to describe that, but I tried to write in code, but then I couldn't read them. I would kind of forget the code. It was this funny thing. And I had a cipher for one of the codes, and I did write in that one for quite some time, but my mom figured out what the cipher was, so she wasn't a dumb cookie. So this card, bring it into form. So we're talking about ripples and leaving something behind. That's what journals were for. So I'm going to read this to you. It is time to bring those possibilities that you dream of into the light and into the world. They need to be more than ideas. They need to live and to manifest. You're being asked to honor yourself with a commitment to complete your inspired task. This will help you grow, and that is a wonderful reason to commit. If you have been thinking about writing a book, painting a picture, or acting on an inspiration, then this is the oracle bringing you an unequivocal yes. Don't dally or dither about the details or worry about how it is you're going to work it out. The universe loves a bold spirit. Once you take a step, you will rush toward it with an enthusiastic, chivalrous lover, opening the doors, gently handing you the guiding as you are moving forward. There is a sacrifice inherent in translating the perfection of an idea into the limited physical form. Although something may be lost when turning a multidimensional concept of endless potential into something concrete, this energy will guide you to realize that there is much more to be gained. You must become free of this inspiration so that you can receive your next inspiration, which is already waiting for you. Which I think is really funny because I have no shortage of information. None. No shortage at all. If anything, I have a limitation of the physical form in the body. I'm working on that. I have a dear set of new friends who are helping me with that, which is really good. I like how this is phrased, though. This is what caught me earlier. There is a sacrifice inherent in translating the perfection of an idea into a limited form. Although something may be lost when turning a multidimensional concept of endless potential into something concrete, you realize there is much more to be gained. You become free of this inspiration and can move on to the next. I find that right there is the struggle I'm having with writing my book. Well, 2 books, 3 books, whatever I'm writing. I'm writing a lot. There is a sacrifice inherent in translating a perfection of an idea into a limited physical form, and something feels like it gets lost when turning a multi-dimensional concept into something that's in our 3D. And that's the part that I sometimes have to wait for that energy to flow properly. I know what it is I need to do, and sometimes that flow, that I get stuck in a place. I get stuck in a word or a concept, or I get it's like that garden hose of water and I think of it as energy in the universe, right? We're all connected. And when I'm writing or I'm working on whatever it is, creatively, like sewing and painting and drawing and creating those things, that's that the techniques sometimes might hiccup. Like I have an idea in my head of what it needs to look like, but I don't know how to get to that technique. I don't know how to make it look like that yet. So I'm always learning new techniques. I'm always bringing more skills into the sphere to practice to get something to look a certain way. And that brings me so much joy. But when I'm writing, it's as though that hose, that faucet that's hooked up to that universal light, and that water light is just flowing in, but there's a clog in the hose, and I get dribbles of water around the clog, or I get so much water, all I get is water. All I get is light. All I get is just all of it at one time. And turning it into words is sometimes tricky. I find that talking concepts out help me. It has to do with one of the ways that I learn is I can read something, but sometimes I have to read it out loud because I have to hear it. I have clairaudience, so I have to hear things sometimes. I have clairsentience, but sometimes I have to hear it to see it. Sometimes I have to see it to hear it. They kind of go interchangeably, and it's this. So that's how I learn, and that means that when I'm writing and when I'm working on things, sometimes it's too much information, or it feels like there's something in the way, and I have to find a way to get it out. And sometimes that means walking away from it for a few minutes to then be able to come back to it, clear my head, clear out all the gunk, and come back to it. So today's card is a beautiful card about the ripples that you create with your light being into the world. And we all have creativity. We all have the ability to change the vibrational ripples out from ourselves. And I started off today's talk about me being a very angry teenager. And that angry teenager went into her 20s completely aware that I had to figure out how to live my own life. And I didn't know how to break away. I did not know how to break away cleanly from the negativity and the trauma and the life of my early childhood. I did not know how to break away from that. And the choices that I made to break away from that, one was karmic, one was energetic, one was something that had to be done. Maybe I didn't go about it the right way, but it had to be done. And some of the other choices, maybe I could have done differently. But I landed where I needed to. I landed up here in Montana, exactly where I needed to be. And I have intentionally tried very hard to walk the path of my blueprint with honesty and integrity so that I could land where I needed to be to teach and to do this work full time. I've known it's coming. I just didn't know how it was going to manifest. And it's amazing how things that I knew when I was younger, but just not knowing how they would manifest, and those ripples. And I've had a couple ripple connections that have come back 25, almost 30 years later, and they're amazing. And it's beautiful, and it's wonderful, and it's a validation of my purpose. It's a validation of my knowingness. As I have had conversations with some dear, dear soul spirit friends and loved ones, and they say, you know what, Red, you're not wrong. You're very never, well, I had one person say, you're very rarely wrong. And then I had somebody else say, you're never wrong. It's just a matter of how time unwinds, but you're never wrong. Which I've needed those validations, because we all live in this physical manifestation, which gets all clogged up with misinformation, and time does not flow straight at all. And it can be overwhelming and confusing sometimes. So it's okay to validate each other. It's not only okay, but it's necessary and important. And I try to remember all of the time that I have a physical fleshy form, and I have the ability to use my words, and I need to be present with people to say those things sometimes. Sometimes I'll have conversations and people will say things, and then 2 days later I'll go, I really should have validated them. And I didn't. And it makes me sad for a minute or two, sometimes more than a minute or two, and I kind of like obsess about it. Because I know I've needed that validation. So I really don't like it when I miss the opportunity to validate someone else. And the more people in a room, the more confusing it gets, because that's a lot of guides and a lot of people and a lot of energy. So if I have ever forgotten to validate you, I'm sorry. But you are important. You are a light being, and you all have gifts. We all have gifts, and we're all part of this together. So have a beautiful Tuesday on the eve of the solstice. Blessed be, and I will see you tomorrow in prayer.